Hello, everybody out there. Back again, talking with Grant Ekstrom. He's the managing partner at Succurri. Today, I want to have a quick conversation about compliance versus security. Now, this came out of a conversation about HIPAA and mostly medical practices, but I think it's valuable for other types of businesses as well, because sometimes being actually secure and the idea of security and maybe some of the vendors out there that you're using might be different, and not be able to help you there. I did want to flash something on the screen, and this is specific to healthcare. So Definitive Healthcare, they say there's about 338,000 practices in the US. And this is a broad, when we say healthcare practices, these aren't the big conglomerate healthcare, companies, but the HIPAA journal reported that 725 of these in 2023, so like a little over 2%, reported breaches of over 500 records or more.
Reported is the key word there.
So we thought it was kind of a good subject, a valuable subject for healthcare companies to understand the difference between security and compliance.
But yeah, I mean, it's more than just healthcare, right? So I mean, like, compliance goes into lots of different industries, everything from finance, obviously healthcare, government, contracting, things like that. There's lots of different places where compliance comes into play. Security, if you are compliant, it doesn't make you secure. And so that's why I always like to make that distinction, is because compliance is kind of a roadmap of getting best practices in place and getting some level of maturity into your security journey. Security, on the other hand, is fairly black and white. Either you are or you are not secure. And also, anybody that tells you that you're 100% secure is lying to you. There's just no such thing. And one of the things that took me the longest in my career to really understand was that security and compliance is also driven by business, right? And people are like, hello, no joke. But what I'm saying is that business determines the risk. And the risk then dictates the level of compliance or the amount of money and time and effort you're going to spend on security. And so when you think of compliance, you're like, hey, I got to go through this compliance. Compliance is about having adequate controls in place, but the auditors aren't telling you specific tools that you have to have or how effective that tool has to be. Where security is, like I said, kind of black and white, where you're a little bit more, hey, this is how it's going to be. This is the control that we're going to use, and it does this. So it's kind of a really interesting understanding of why they're different and how you have to kind of keep them separated, but they're complementary of the two.
Compliance is really like, how are you addressing these on paper? How do you say that you're addressing these things?
Correct.
Right? And security is actually what are the controls in place? What are you actually doing to address these things?
Well, and to mitigate the risk, right? So security, when you have a defined risk, and that is defined by the business, right? So ransomware is a risk, business email compromise is a risk, insider theft. I mean, all these things are different risks, right? And the level of the risk should be equal to the security control you put into place. So if I have a really high likelihood of getting ransomware, that's pretty much broad, right? Everybody in the world has a high level of being ransomware. You want to have a really effective control that's going to stop that. If I have a low level of insider threat, I've got like 7 people, 8 people in my organization, and keep in mind size doesn't really matter, but I maybe don't put in a lot of controls to stop insider threat. I maybe have a high risk for business email compromise because everyone does. I probably want to do a lot of training to my staff. So I'm going to implement a control training for like phishing and ongoing security education. So I'm going to spend more time and money into that because I have the likelihood is much higher than something else. And so compliance, on the other hand, is basically it's a checklist of a governing body that your type of organization works under. So like HIPAA is a governing body for medical,
Right.
and DFARS and NIST are frameworks that are used by government organizations. And then you have a whole set of different guidelines for financial organizations from like the SEC guidelines and things like that. So keep in mind, it can get really confusing because every single organization or type of business potentially falls under one set of compliance or multiple different sets of compliance. The nice thing about it is that when you kind of have that mix, you want to use just kind of some really solid frameworks. I guess that's my takeaway, right? So if you are going to think of one thing for today, you want to have a good solid framework that what we call crosswalks to these different levels of compliance. So like CIS is a really basic introductory framework that you can use that will give you security and some level of compliance. Now you could be compliant with everything that you're told to do. Maybe not, but it'll give you some best practices for security. And then once you get past CIS, then you start maybe looking at like a NIST framework. And so that's like the maturity level 2 and 3, right? Where you start getting more sophisticated with what you're doing. And now NIST is going to crosswalk to lots of different compliances. But now you've got these security controls in place. So while they're completely different, they are kind of, they're amigos going along the same path, but they're separate paths.
The organization or the governing body of your industry, you mentioned a few: financial, SEC, HIPAA in the medical field. Those are not frameworks, but those are, here's what you
governing bodies.
Governing bodies. Thank you. Governing bodies that recommend this is how you remain compliant with security based on this industry.
Right. And each governing body, like I look at some of those and I'm like, that doesn't make you like, yeah, you're compliant, but you are definitely not secure. Right. And so that's why like you always want to have the distinction. It's always fun having a conversation with like a compliance administrator about this, about like, you know, how the worlds are different, because I come from the security world of like, hey, you want to put all the controls in place to mitigate for any potential security risk ever, right? And the answer is that we can't do that, because then it stops your entire business from functioning. Like you lock it down so tight, you no longer can do what you're supposed to do for your job. And then compliance is looked at like, oh man, I got it. You know, most people are just checking boxes, right? Because they're like, I'm being told to put this in place, but I have no guidance on how effective it has to be.
And so maybe a good step would be, how compliant do you say your business is relative to these governing bodies? And on the other hand, how secure are you to how you say you are? And
well, yeah, and well, that's why
a good place to start.
Yeah, like I said, I really like the concept of just adopt a really good known framework, and you get the best of both worlds, right? You get the security out of it, and you're most likely going to be compliant in most of the things that you need to be compliant in. So maybe you have a couple more things that you have to sign off on that weren't part of your framework, but 99% of it's already done for you. So like I said, CIS is a real basic one, right? It's the entry level. I don't even know how many controls there are now. There's like 28, 30, whatever it is, but it's like training wheels for security, right? It's easy. A lot of the stuff's pretty easy to do. And then those are going to be able to crosswalk to a lot of these different compliance frameworks. And you get the security out of it. And then you just kind of move through. So as you adopt these security frameworks, you then become compliant at the same time.